Hello, 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 hello. Okay. Does that work? Are we working? These are the beauties of live. When we say live, we actually mean quite live. Back to when the sound doesn't work. So hopefully the sound works. Yay! Andrew says that he can hear me, as can Jeff. So hopefully everyone can hear me. Let's start again. Take two. Happy Wednesday, my friend. It is so good to see you. Thank you for your patience with me as we bring you this live show. And if you ever thought it wasn't live, well, the proof is in the pudding. It's very much live. It is so good to see everybody hanging out in the chat. Thanks for, holding me down while things got a little crazy. That's what we're here for. Thank you to John and Liz and Mike and Jeff and Jen and everybody for holding me down when we have technical difficulties. Thank you. You rock. Appreciate you always. If you haven't said hi in the chat yet, why not? We're a friendly bunch. As you can see, we all like to help each other. Say hi in the chat. Let us know where you are coming in from. I am really excited about today because we are going to dive into all things entrepreneurship. It is one of the questions that I get asked about probably the most frequently because we just realized the other day that my LinkedIn Learning course, Entrepreneurship Foundations, has just crossed, wait for it, 250,000 learners. Yeah, to be exact, 288,000 people from all over the world have taken and completed my Entrepreneurship Foundations course, which is just mind-blowing. Absolutely mind-blowing. I'm so grateful. And so I thought, you know what? We should celebrate. 250,000 people is a whole lot of people. So we should create a whole section where we talk about all things entrepreneurship, do a little AMA, ask me anything. These are always really fun. And always, as you can see by the sound not working, spur the moment because we don't necessarily have anything planned. It's based on your questions and what you have going on. So as Jeff says, boom. Who has the questions about all things entrepreneurship, side hustle for you, for a friend, for your son, for your daughter, for your cousin, for your niece? Let's get into all things entrepreneurship. And even if you're like, Kim, I have no desire to be an entrepreneur, that's okay too, because what I think is going to become insanely popular in the coming year is intrapreneurship. And if you have not heard this term, let me be the first one to clue you in. Entrepreneurship is when you think and act like an entrepreneur within a larger corporate workforce. I think this is going to become key as we get into this new way of work because people need to come up with new, fast solutions. And the way we've always done it, it's no longer going to cut it anymore. So we need these entrepreneurial thinkers. We need these people who are malleable and can think on their feet within these corporate infrastructures. So even if you're not ready to become your own entrepreneur, even just thinking and acting like an entrepreneur within an organization is going to help you out immensely. So those questions, there's a place for them too, even if you don't want to become a full-time entrepreneur. So I think we should tackle a little bit of that as well. I also want to say that holy moly, the rest of this month, have we come in packing a punch. I know I missed you last week, but it was my birthday, okay? It was the day of my birth, which we really should be thanking my mom for, not me. I didn't do much on that day, but she did a whole lot. So it was the day of my birth, so I celebrated. So I didn't do a live, and I'm sorry for that, but I'm making up for it by bringing you this and two other really power-packed coffee sessions in the next 2 weeks. Next week, we have Jason Pfeiffer, the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine. He joined us quite a while ago, but he's coming back on, and we're diving into his new book, Build for Tomorrow. I'm really excited about that. And then the week after that, we have the chief design officer at Pepsi. Yeah, Pepsi, like the Pepsi that you drink. We are going to have Mauro with us, and Mauro is a wealth of information. He has been with Pepsi for years and years. He also just came out with a book recently, so I'm really excited to dig in with him. Two great guys, not necessarily entrepreneurs, but definitely entrepreneurs and entrepreneurial thinking people. So I'm really excited. Just giving a little sneak peek of what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. So let's dig into all things entrepreneurship. I want to give a special gold star shout out to Jen, because every time I ask her questions, I'm always worried that it's like crickets. And you're like, are there any questions? And then no one asks questions. And then you're like, oh, no one asked a question. And I'm just up here panicked, hoping that people ask a question. So I will answer Jen's question first. Thank you, Jen, for asking this. Is there a difference between an entrepreneur and a business owner? My personal opinion is yes, there is a difference. To me, a business owner can simply be somebody who is taking over ownership of a business. So, a perfect example that I always like to think about is think about any company that you know that has been around for years and years and years, right? So, a good example of this could be Post cereals, right? Post cereals was started, I think it was like 100 and something years ago now. And that company has been handed down from generation to generation from one business owner to the other. And so it's not necessarily the person that started the business. It's not necessarily the entrepreneur that to this day is still running the business, but in fact, they do own the business. So, and they still have to think like an entrepreneur, obviously coming up with new cereal flavors or new marketing initiatives. But something like Post Cereal, I think, is a great example of someone who started the business, is no longer alive, no longer kicking, not with us, but there is still somebody in the family or a private equity firm or another of the company that owns the business and runs it like a business owner. So I think they're definitely two distinct things, but I think both of them have a lot of similar qualities, mainly forward thinking, really thinking about how to grow a business, keep a business running even in really hard times. So I think that both of those things, while different, have a lot of similarities. So thank you, Jen, for kicking us off. I really appreciate it. David's question: I was told to treat my department as a business within a business. I don't know who told you this, David, but chef's kiss to that person, because I completely agree. I think when you start to take ownership of your department, of your side of the business, of your little niche, your little area, is when all the ideas can really start to flourish. You can start to say, why are we using this computer program? Or why are we doing this method? I think we could do things a little differently. Again, you're kind of thinking as an owner, you're thinking about what can I do to make this better, faster, smoother, stronger, as opposed to thinking more like, I'm a cog in the wheel, and this is the way we've always done it. And this is the computer program we've always used. So why would I question if we should use another one? I don't know who gave you this piece of advice. I hope it's somebody that you still currently work with, because I absolutely adore it. And I think when you start bringing those entrepreneurial ideas to management and say, hey, I realize that we've been using this computer program for quite some time, but I found two others that not only do a better job, but they're cheaper. Whoever runs the company or your boss is going to say, man, this guy David's great. He not only brought us a better system, but it's actually cheaper than the one we're using. That is a simple but really strong example of how thinking like an entrepreneur, or thinking that you have a business within a business, can help not only your department, but the entire company overall. So absolutely, I love this. I definitely think that that person should get some sort of gold star from you, David, because that's pretty great. Question from John: as an entrepreneur, when do you consider taking on partners or investors? I definitely want to hear what everyone else thinks about this in the chat. I know that we have some entrepreneurs among us. I know Jeff and Jen are entrepreneurs, for example. I'd love to hear what their thoughts are in the chat to help me answer this question from John about when you should consider taking on partners or investors. This is my personal rule of thumb on this, John. You should only be taking on partners when you feel that there is a critical need that cannot be solved by outsourcing, hiring, or getting a joint partnership. So there's pros and cons of bringing on partners. I like to think about it just quick and easy: marriage. That's basically what it is. You have a social security number, somebody else has a social security number. You decide to become co-founders in a business, and you know what? Your social security numbers are married together in the form of the IRS anyways, when you form an LLC. So you really have to think about, am I ready to marry this person? Do I know enough about them that I would feel good marrying about them? Or can we just date? Or can we just be exclusive? Or can I just hire them on to do some consulting work? So really, when it comes to partners or investors, I always like to say, you really want to do your due diligence. You don't just meet somebody and marry them after the third date. You really want to do your due diligence. You really want to make sure that it's the right fit. And above all else, you want to make sure that you have an escape hatch, an escape route. What do I mean by this? I mean, when things are happy, it's very easy to think, well, things are great. Things are amazing. I have this new partner. I have this new investor. Everything's amazing. It's all sunshine and rainbows. And it's not until things become not sunshine and rainbows, it becomes dark and stormy, that you start thinking, how am I going to get out of this? Or how is this other person going to get out of this? But at that point, you're in a dark and stormy storm. So it's not necessarily in everybody's best interest to be kumbaya and be very friendly. So when things are good, start to ask the hard questions. What happens if you want to leave the business? What happens if I want to leave the business? What happens if you get hit by a bus? What happens if I get hit by a bus? So really starting to ask those hard questions and saying, what happens if all these terrible worst case scenarios start to come true? Let's come up with a solution now. Let's put that in writing now in our initial contract, so that if and when down the road, God forbid, those situations come up, no problem, we already have a plan in place. You can think about it like, just like there are prenups for marriage, a prenuptial agreement. It's sort of like a prenuptial agreement, but before a business. So really looking at your contracts and saying, how can I set myself up to protect myself and my potential partners and investors for a worst case scenario? So I think, though, this is one of the hardest questions, and I would try to get as many people to weigh in on this as possible. Don't make this decision alone, no matter what. You have a gut feeling, you love this person, you love this investor. Ask other people, get lots of opinions. Don't do things based on gut. Not in this scenario. Never good. Okay, Jeff's question. If you were to start a new business now, what would it focus on? Product, SaaS, healthcare? Well, if I told you, I would have to kill you. No, I'm just kidding. I wouldn't actually have to kill you. But it is a question that I find myself asking quite a bit, especially when I'm sitting around with other entrepreneurs and we are pontificating on what businesses we would start or what we think would be really interesting. I think there is going to be a ton of opportunity coming up in the last year, just because of all the disruption that we've seen since 2020. So I was giving this sort of analogy or painting this picture to somebody the other day. If you have ever been swimming in the ocean and you're kind of getting into the ocean and all that sand is getting kicked up at the beginning, you maybe can't see all the fish that are around you or the coral or the shells because there's just so much dust in the water. But once the dust settles, you start to see, oh, there are some shells beneath my feet, or oh, there's a piece of coral, or oh, here's a really interesting fish. Hopefully not a shark. Hopefully it's just a cute fish, but you can start to see the picture that's being painted. I think what happened in the last couple of years is we saw a lot of dust. We saw a lot of things getting kicked up. People are working from home. The way of work is changing. Things are going digital, Zoom meetings everywhere. And now that the dust is starting to settle, we're starting to see things a little more clearly. Okay, well, maybe it does turn into a hybrid work model. Or maybe I don't have to get on 17 flights a year. Maybe I can get on 6 flights a year because the rest of those meetings have turned into Zoom meetings. So I think as the dust starts to settle, we're going to see interesting opportunities in the business world of where new companies and new products can come in and fit this need, fit this new service that people are looking for. I think that we are going to see a ton change in this space. And I will also say, likewise, we can also see the changes when it comes to the household. So as some people have been working from home or work-life balance has started to shift, we have seen an explosion, for example, in pet ownership. Petco and some of these other pet companies are having some of their best years in decades because so many people adopted dogs and cats and pets during the pandemic. So I think there's going to be interesting businesses that, based off of the culmination of the last 2 years and changes that were made both by us at work and us in our home life, that there's going to be business opportunities in there. So if I were starting a business from scratch, I would look into 1, the business sphere, and 2, probably home. I think home is a very interesting space, or even kids. I think that's also a very interesting space right now. So I know not exactly the most exact answer, but I think that those 2 areas are really going to grow in a big way. Next up, Kimberly's question: how do we leverage the flexibility of entrepreneurship so that it aligns with our vision for our whole life and supports prioritizing self-care? This is a tough one, Kimberly. I feel like I am still, after a decade plus of entrepreneurship, trying to settle this question of work-life balance and finding what's right and finding a way that I feel happy and everyone else feels happy and work feels satisfied. It's sort of a never-ending thing. This is the best advice that somebody gave me, so I will in turn give it to you. You can think about an entrepreneurship situation like a 3-legged stool, the simple bar stools that you see when you walk into a bar. And the 3 legs are family, so like family, friends, work, and then your mental health. If any one of those things can be a little wobbly, again, you can think about a bar stool. So for example, I posted something yesterday about burnout. So again, if your mental health, if you're feeling like a little burnt out, then work better be going well, and your friends and family and kind of home life, that better be going well. Because then you can kind of be like, okay, my chair's a little wobbly. Let me get this burnout under control, and then I can go back to like a steady stool. If you start to have burnout, mental health, and work is also, then you have 2 wobbly stool legs. Your stool's coming down. Your stool is crashing on the floor, and it's not going to be pretty. So what I always try to think about is, if I know, or if I can see that, okay, coming up, I'm going to have a hard Q4 at work. Let's just put that as an example. I'm going to have a really hard Q4 at work. I will, in preparation for that, kind of start to gear up and maybe talk to my friends and family proactively. Hey guys, as I'm thinking about the end of the year, October, November, December is going to be really hard for me. I might be asking you to help me out, to pitch in, to help me take out the trash, or do that extra grocery run, or pick up my niece or nephew for me because I don't have time. So kind of prepping people in that circle of like, hey, I'm going to be needing some help. And then proactively setting off time in my calendar. Okay, Kim, you're going to need 2 hours a week to just kind of get your head straight, whether it's laundry or errands or whatever it is. So again, because if I know that work is going to be hard, I try to prep the other 2 areas to have a kind of shaky stool leg, if you will. So someone had offered me that kind of visual reminder when it comes to entrepreneurship and work life, and kind of having that flexibility, but really being able to balance it all. I hate the word balance because nobody really has it. And anybody who does is just feeding you a bunch of baloney. So that is the kind of best example when it comes to leveraging flexibility. And I would just say, as much as you can, if possible, try to do two things at once. Not always, it's not always possible, but especially now that people have hybrid ways of working, I have had plenty of times where I have done calls. I've taken myself off of Zoom, off of video, done it audio only while I'm loading the dishwasher, or done audio only while I'm watering the houseplants. So if there are small ways, little ways that you can kind of double up or get a little bit of work and life going at once, I think that that is absolutely a great way to go. But again, sort of a never ending hard question, because it's just sort of, it's a hard one. It's a hard one. I love this question because I love talking about young people and students so much. How should students prepare for entrepreneurship? Should they work in a small business? 100%, absolutely. Again, you can tell I love analogies. You can tell I love giving examples. I absolutely adore telling people this. If you one day hope to be an entrepreneur, if you one day hope to start your own business, go work in a business that does what you want to do. So perfect. I'll use myself as an example. I didn't know this at the time, but it just kind of worked out this way. I graduated from college and I went and worked at a large magazine publishing house called Condé Nast. They publish Vogue, Vanity Fair, Brides, ton of other magazines. I worked there for 2.5 years. I made lots of connections, really got the ins and outs of how the magazine industry worked, printing, production, sort of behind the scenes, 007, James Bond in the back room, taking all the notes, seeing how the insides work. When I eventually left Condé Nast and started my own business, that involved printing magazines and printing content, I was able to take all that secret sauce, all that learning. I'm not saying steal stuff. Don't like steal the McDonald's ketchup formula. I don't want to be in trouble for that. But I could take all those learnings and see, what did they do well? Where did they miss the bar? And I could then apply them to my own business. So it was the best sort of testing ground that I could see what was working in this company and what I would need to change to excel further in my own company. So I love this. If students can do internships, if students can work for a small business, if students can even just work in the industry that they one day want to start a business in, absolutely invaluable. Go see how the sausage is made, if you will. Go see what gets put into a business and how you can put your own spin on it and create something special and unique for yourself down the road when you decide to become an entrepreneur or start a side hustle. Either one. Absolutely love that. I think it's so great. I love that John asked a follow-up question here for everyone. I would love for everyone to answer this in the comment section in the chat box. For all the entrepreneurs here, if you were starting over with the lessons you've learned intact, how would you approach it all differently? I better see that comment section exploding, because I know that so many people have lessons learned of what they would do differently if they would do it all over again. And even if you're not an entrepreneur, if you've ever had a side hustle or a side business, I better see you typing in that chat box, because I know for a fact that you have lessons learned that you would change if you could do it all over again. For me, if I could start over with the lessons I've learned, I would do two things very differently from the start. Number one, I would get professionals immediately. I was of the mindset that you kind of DIY and hustle and Google and YouTube and solve it all. I thought I could do my own books, even though I was not a registered certified public accountant. I thought that I could do my own legal contracts, even though I was not a licensed lawyer. You can do a lot of things. You can do your own website, maybe some of your own design. When it comes to professional services, keyword, professional services, like an accountant, like a lawyer, hire the professionals. They went to school for a lot of years. They got a lot of certificates to make sure that you're doing things appropriately. If I could do it all over again, I would say do that first and foremost. I would save myself so many fines by the IRS. I got fined so many times because I am not an accountant and I did my books wrong. And I would get into some sticky situations with legal contracts because I am not a lawyer. So I would get those people on board immediately, even if it costs money, even if it was really like, oh, I don't know if I need that yet. They're professional for a reason. I would do that first. So that would be my number one. My number two would be, and I referenced it earlier, to get all of my ducks in a row, looking at all the potential scenarios. Now that I know so many entrepreneurs, I have heard so many stories of people who wanted to leave the business. Something medical happened. Maybe somebody got married. Maybe somebody was going through a divorce. All of that can affect the business if you didn't predict it from the beginning. So I always tell new entrepreneurs, and if I myself was starting a business from scratch today, or I could go back in a time machine, I would say, man, cross all your T's and dot all your I's. I got lucky and knock on wood, like nothing bad happened to me, but I've heard so many entrepreneurs with horror stories about things that could have easily been prevented if they had thought of them from the start. So again, just like a prenuptial agreement with a marriage, go in, put everything on the table, even the worst case scenarios, and say, how would this affect my work if this happened? So those would be the things that I would do differently. But again, I would love to see in the chat, Jeff saying if he would start over, I would have gotten investors before working so much on a product build. That is such a good one. Absolutely. Kimberly says, I would have had more of a transition from my day job to solo entrepreneurship. Also from my coaching tribe earlier. Magda would sharpen her communication skills, and Jim is similar to me, get it in writing. I'm glad that Jim and I seem to be on the same page about that because that is such a big one. Nolan is asking, do you recommend someone go to business school or start a business and learn along the way? I have so many thoughts on this, Nolan. How much time do you have? I think that business school could be helpful depending on what type of business you want to start. So again, I'll use myself as an example. I have a business that focuses on marketing and entertainment. You don't really need a business school degree to get very far in marketing and entertainment. You have to know about trends. You have to know about seeing where the trends are going. That's not really something that you would necessarily learn in business school. However, I have had other friends who are starting apps or algorithms or AI, and business school does help them think about things in a more conceptual way when it comes to building AI and computer systems and partners. So I would say business school depends. However, something to always keep in mind, you can always go to business school. You can go to business school if you're 30. You can go to business school if you're 40. You can go to business school if you're 50. So do I think it's something that you need to rush into and absolutely do business school before you start a business? No. You could start a business. It could fail. It could succeed. You could learn a lot of lessons. And you could decide in 10 years, hey, you know what? I want to go to business school. I will say I didn't go to business school. So let me reference that. However, I do know friends that went to business school. One of the main perks of business school, if you will, is that network. It's that network. If you've ever heard, I say it all the time, I am convinced there is a Harvard mafia, Harvard Business School, HBS. I'm convinced it's a mafia. A mafioso, I think they murder people for each other. I don't know. They all seem to get funded by the same people. There's some like Illuminati stuff going on, but I do think that you do have that connection. Oh, you graduated from Harvard Business School? I graduated from Harvard Business School. Oh, we can network together. Oh, you know this person that also graduated from Harvard Business School. So I do think that there is a whether you want to call it an old boys club or a network. There is some cachet, if you will, depending on what business school you go to and depending on what industry that you want to get to, that I would be remiss not to point out. So that can be a massive value. However, if you are good at networking in general, if you go to the conferences, if you shake the hands, if you get on LinkedIn and make connections, then you might be able to replace the networking that you might have from a business school. So a little bit of a power-packed answer, but hopefully that tackles a little bit. I love Andrew's point. I have a BS in business. I learned 95% out in the real world. And Zuhal, oh my gosh, I agree. Harvard feels like a scam. Well, I don't know about a scam. It certainly gets you connections. And John is saying, I got my MBA. After 10 years in management, the biggest value that I learned is how to speak and understand the language of business spoken by investors, venture capitalists, etc. So true. It's definitely something that you want to keep in mind and say, okay, what am I really learning from this? What is going to be valuable? So such a great one. I love this question from Giacomo as well. How much storytelling is in your opinion important as an entrepreneur? I think storytelling is absolutely essential as an entrepreneur, and there's no way that you can get around it. I have always said, I will continue to say until I'm blue in the face, people do business with people. People buy from people. People buy from companies with stories. They buy it because they say, you know what? I really like this. They stand for something that I believe in. People want to do business with people at the end of the day. And the better you become at telling your story, the story of you as an entrepreneur, the story of your business, the more people are going to fall in love with you as a business owner or your business. So storytelling is absolutely essential. Here is my secret hack when it comes to storytelling and entrepreneurship. A lot of time in entrepreneurship, you are pitching yourself and you're pitching your business. I will be the first to tell you, this is horribly uncomfortable. It's like, I'm shy, I'm awkward, I don't want to talk about myself, I don't want to talk about my business. You don't want to do it. It's incredibly uncomfortable. But you have to do it. So you're kind of stuck in this conundrum of like, this is so uncomfortable, but I know it's necessary, and just, what do I do? I absolutely flourished as an entrepreneur after doing this. I took a stand-up improv class. And I know what you're thinking. What, Kim? Improv, comedy, what on earth does that have to do with entrepreneurship? What on earth does that have to do with storytelling or pitching your business? That is the furthest thing. I don't want to be an actor. I don't want to go on SNL. I don't want to turn into a live comedy routine. Here is why I think it is a really sneaky, essential hack. When you do an improv class, you have to think on your feet. It's the whole point of improv. You're improving with other people. They're throwing things into the story, and you immediately have to react confidently and build off of it. That is no different than entrepreneurship. You're sitting in a meeting, someone sits there and goes, so tell me about your business in 30 seconds. You're sitting there trying to tell them about their business. And then they go, yeah, well, what about this scenario? And on your feet, you have to be like, well, based on that scenario, da 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 da. So this improv class that I actually took it unrelated to entrepreneurship. I thought it would just be kind of fun to take it. So I took it unrelated to entrepreneurship. It actually was like a secret key ingredient to helping me so much when it came to storytelling and pitching myself and the business. So if anyone is interested in a side hustle or entrepreneurship, highly suggest the sneaky side secret of signing up for an improv class. They have a bunch at your local community college theater. Check it out. I thought it was extremely helpful. And Jen agrees. Improv rules the world. I love using it in my talks and workshops. I just think it's one of those things that you don't realize how much you use it. You don't realize how much you're improving until you're actually doing it. So I think it's something that would help anyone, regardless of if you are an entrepreneur or not. So I have time for about one or two more questions here because I know you are busy. You got a lot going on today. So I want to make sure that we get you off and running to your next activity. So let's tackle one or two more together, and then we will line up and get ready for Jason Pfeiffer, editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur, who will be joining us next week. So let's take one more from Alexandra. Close to Giacomo's question about storytelling. How important is your personal brand for entrepreneurship in social media these days? Wow. This one is an interesting one because it really depends on which way you're going. What do I mean by that? This is my own sort of like sneaky formula of how I think this works. I find that people that have product-based businesses, so they're selling cookie dough, they're selling belts, they're selling shoes, they're selling socks. A lot of times they can put themselves in the center of that story. I started this business, Bombas Socks, where for every one sock that we sell, we donate socks to somebody in need. You can kind of tell your own story, why you started the business, why you thought this was so interesting. And people can sort of fall in love. It's what I call the Shark Tank model. So if anybody has seen Dragon's Den or Shark Tank, you sort of fall in love with the entrepreneur, you fall in love with the story, and then you fall in love with the product. So Bee's Lemonade, a Shark Tank contestant, everyone fell in love with this little girl who made this amazing lemonade company. And then you're kind of like, yeah, I'll buy the lemonade. Not to say the lemonade isn't great, it is, but a lot of people make great lemonade. What you really did is you fell in love with her and you fell in love with her story. So I like to call that the sort of Shark Tank method that works really well for physical goods. Again, I'm selling lemonade, I'm selling belts, shoes, socks, products. This is where I think it's a little harder. If you have a service-based business, there's kind of two scenarios with service-based businesses. One is sort of you're a solo entrepreneur. So let's say you're a therapist or a coach or a trainer. If somebody's coming to work out with you as a trainer, they kind of got to like you because there's a lot of people that might be able to help them lose 10 pounds or, hit their marathon best running running pace. So they really have to like you as a person because they're going to be training with you 1, 2, 3 days a week. So in that sense, storytelling is so important. However, there's also service-based businesses that are massive. So think about the apps that are on your phone. Think about your pest control company or the company that comes to mow your lawn or clean your pool or take out your trash or any of these other things. You might say, well, I just kind of care that the lawn gets mowed. It doesn't really matter to me. The entrepreneur, the story, at the end of the day, my grass is really tall and I want my grass to be short. So it doesn't matter as much. So I would say it kind of depends on the business a little bit and how much time you're going to be spending with that person, where you hear about it, how you fall in love with it. But hopefully that kind of narrows down the storytelling a little bit more for you, Alexandra. I know it's kind of a complicated one. I love that Jess said you're pitching you, not the product, the business, or the idea. Absolutely true. You're always pitching yourself when it comes to this. Absolutely. I definitely want to touch on this question from Pranya. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Is it okay if your field is different, but you're interested to start a business or in another field that you may or may not have experience in? I would say this is absolutely could potentially be a secret weapon for you. Oftentimes, when we're working in the same industry for years and years and years, we can get stuck in what's called groupthink, or again, that sort of, well, this is the way we've always done it. So oftentimes it's when you have newcomers coming into the space saying, I haven't worked in this space at all, But because I haven't worked in this space at all, I can think about things and approach problems in a totally different way, in a totally unique way. You can look at, again, love him or hate him, Elon being a great example of this. Elon Musk said, I'm going to tackle space. Not to say NASA hadn't tackled space for 10, 50 plus years. But Elon said, I'm going to approach this with a different, I'm sort of an outsider. I'm going to approach this with a different mindset. And he was able to make a lot of advances that NASA and other programs weren't able to see or execute on. They were sort of trapped in their own history and in their old way of doing things. So a lot of times when you are coming into an industry or into a business totally new, totally fresh, you can actually add a whole lot of value because you're approaching things in a very new and different way. So I think this could absolutely be essential and really powerful for you to think about. So do your research, obviously, on the industry and make sure somebody else hasn't thought of something that you're currently pitching. But I think this could be a really great essential for you to stand out and solve problems in a whole new way. Oh my gosh, this has been so much fun. Your questions have been on fire. I feel like we had such a strong conversation about entrepreneurship, storytelling, starting a business, do's and don'ts. It's been a whole lot. However, if you're like, you know what? I want to hear Kim talk about entrepreneurship a little more. And I want to hear all of her do's and don'ts and biggest mistakes when it comes to entrepreneurship. You can check that all out. I power packed it in to my Entrepreneurship Foundations course here on LinkedIn Learning. I think it's about a 48-minute course. It is literally everything I wish I knew about entrepreneurship. If I could, like Jeff said, get in that time machine, start all over again. So you can go to LinkedIn Learning and check out my Entrepreneurship Foundations course if that's of interest to you, or if you think it's of interest to a friend or a family member or a coworker that has maybe talked about starting a business or a side hustle or been interested in it. So this has been so much fun. I want to thank everybody for their amazing questions. They have been so fire, so great. I have enjoyed this immensely. Like I said, next week we will be joined by Jason Pfeiffer. So next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern, let's all meet up here, same time, same place. Let's bring our caffeine. Let's bring our heated caffeine, as Jessica and Jeff have pointed out, because nobody likes cold coffee or cold caffeine. So let's bring all of our great questions when it comes to building for tomorrow and the future of entrepreneurship and work when Jason Pfeiffer, editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur, joins us next week. So exciting. Until then, have a beautiful rest of the week. It was so good seeing you. Thank you for all the birthday wishes. I really appreciated it. It was so much fun. This year is going to be the best one yet. I just know it. Thank you so much. And I look forward to seeing you next Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern. Take care.